Hello everyone, Brice here from Incidence.studio, and as a long answer to the question tuning or not tuning your kicks, I made a short video about that yesterday, but I got some questions in DMs either on Facebook, Instagram or YouTube, so actually I thought I should cover this more in depth. So the first question was, should you or shouldn't you tune your kicks? And my answer was, it's all a question about phase relationship between kick and bass, and talking about digital sound sources, samples or analog sound sources. And this was a bit unclear for some people. So without any further ado, I'm gonna dive into an Ableton session and we're gonna talk further about this. So I made a little kick drum in Ableton. Very easy. What I did is operator, using one oscillator as a sine wave, 60 Hz fundamental and some pitch envelope. Without a pitch envelope and with a pitch envelope to have some attack. So if we look at this into a oscilloscope, what do we see? Here the phase is shifting from one kick to another because I unchecked on purpose the retrigger. But most of the digital oscillators by default have this retrig option turn on. What does it mean? That at every hit, at every single hit, the phase is going to remain exactly the same because the oscillator is starting again to generate the sound wave. While for analog, the oscillator, the VCO, is always playing in the background, so it's changing, and at some point the door is opening, and so the phase is not the same. So if I unclick the retrig, I mimic this behavior, and now we see from one kick to another, the phase is shifting. Even if the frequency is the same, the phase is not the same. The impact of that is tremendous, because if your kick and your bass are playing the same note at the same time, or going from the one to another, from the kick to the bass, for example, ducking, if the phase is not the same and you are playing them both at the same time, you are creating phase cancellation. Let me maybe make a little example of what phase cancellation sounds. This is one oscillator playing the low end. Now I'm duplicating that one, and what I'm doing on the second one is I will change a bit the phase. Instead of starting at zero phase, it's starting, you see here the waveform is moving. This is the difference in phase from one oscillator to the other one. If I'm playing both together now, in phase, perfect, it's louder. But what's happening if I move the phase? Now it's quieter. By actually turning on this oscilloscope on one instance and sidechaining it with the other one, like that. Let's look at both together. What we see here, the two lines, is the difference in phase between the two oscillators. There is a small difference, and here you see they're nearly cancelling each other at 45. To summarize, the idea is, with analog sound sources, most of analog sound sources have no retrigger option, so the phase will be drifting from one hit to another, either for the kick or for the bass or for both. So if I'm coming back to my kick drum and I'm gonna listen to that one, an easy way to know it without looking at an oscilloscope is that with a very short attack time, the quality of the attack will be different because of the difference in the starting point of your oscillator. Let's listen to my kick drums without and with retrigger. With retriggering, exactly the same. All the attacks are sounding exactly the same, right? Now, if I turn off the retrigger, listen to the attack and the quality of the attacks. Sometimes we have a little click, and sometimes we don't have it. Why? Because if I look at the waveform that has been recorded from those kick drums here, for example, what is happening is at some point, well, here you see the kick is starting here. Actually, there's a little fade in because it's never a totally zero attack time. So there's a little fade in, but it should have started here in the phase, where my mouse is, right? Where actually, if I look at another impact further away, here, let's look at another one here. So you see it's different. And if the sound was to start here, I would hear more of a click than if the sound was starting here, because this is also a little trick using while editing audio. You always want to cut at what we call the zero crossings, so that even without any crossfade, there is a smooth edit point. There is no click. Well, if I was to cut here, I would hear a click because, well, the speaker would have to move from 0 position to that position in no time. So this is impossible, so there is a click. By the way, this is a little trick you can use if you want to load a sampler and you want to change the quality. Let's load a sampler and let's put this one in here. If you want to change the quality of your kick, it's just by moving the starting point. Let's listen to that. Put it a bit louder. See, if I'm at a 0 crossing, it's very quiet, it's smooth. If I'm at a high point I have a click. So basically this is happening, and this is part of why people like analog, because even if it's the same impact, the sound is never exactly the same. This is bringing life to sound. That's what people like about analog sound, is it's less sterile, and even if a loop is looping, it's never sounding exactly the same. But when it comes to kick and bass relationship, because it's low end, you want the low end to work together. So if I have to listen, for example, here I made a little kick in Serum, same ID, sine wave with a pitch envelope. Let's listen to that one. Can make it shorter a bit. Okay, now I have, this is with random, which means the phase is changing. If you listen, the quality of the attacks is not always exactly the same. Sometimes it's more clicky, sometimes it's smoother. If I play this with a bass line made in operator, playing it a bit longer, you hear what's happening here in the low end. Let's pay attention to the low end. You know, I will help you. I will put an EQ on the master bus. And I'm going to filter the highs, so we pay attention just to the low end. You feel how the level is changing? Sometimes it's louder, sometimes it's quieter. It's not consistent, but what's happening now, if I turn the phase off on the kick and I turn the red trigger on the bass line, now I have a consistent low end. So some people like analog and they like the moving quality of things. So there's a trick. If you are using analog sound sources, not samples or not digital, and you don't have this retrigger option, that you have this randomness, to avoid the drift in the low end, the trick is to not tune your kicks. So for example, I recommend going 5 semitones higher, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because then the difference in frequency between the kick and the bass is enough that the destructive intermodulation of both signals is not such a problem. Here we really feel the sound coming in at some point and coming out. Here it's noisy, it's a bit gritty, but it's kind of same grit all the time. So bottom line, if you are using analog sound sources, and one is enough. If one is drifting, problem is already there. So if you are using analog sound sources either for your kick or for your bass with something where the phase is not consistent, you want to detune your kick and your bass. If you have digital kick and digital bass line where the phase is always the same, you might prefer to have them tuned, but not only tuned, but also phase aligned. And so I'm going to show you this little trick with this great oscilloscope, which is called Ocular Scope from Boomshanka. I'm going to put this on my bass line. I'm feeding this as a sidechain with Serum, with my kick drum, and I can see both waveforms together. We see it's consistent, but they are not in phase. So now what you want to do is either start, there are different options. The easy option is to try to look, is a phase inversion enough? Here I see it's not the case, but I can still let you hear how it sounds. Or you can play with, for example, the phase position of your oscillators. Here it's retriggered, and I can shift the phase on the synth itself. See how I'm moving things? Of course, because there is a pitch envelope on the kick, the beginning of the kick will never be in phase with the bass. What's important is the decay part. Another thing you can try if ever you don't have access to the phase of the oscillator itself is using actually a low-cut filter, because low-cut filters are inducing phase rotation, and this is where it can come in handy. Everyone says don't turn on a low-cut filter on your low-end content or your kicks and bass because it's inducing phase shifts, but sometimes you want actually the phase to shift. One, I'm going to take Pro Q from FabFilter because for another reason I have more choices in the curves, so I can go more in depth. Look now, when I changed, see, so by changing the curve of the low-cut filter and its frequency, I can flip the phase of my bassline. If you don't have an oscilloscope, or if you don't want to use one, this one, Ocular Scope from Boomshanka, is actually a free one, so there's no reason not to use it. But there's a last trick that you can use, is by actually just touching your woofer with your hands. By touching the woofer with your hands, you're going to be able to feel the kick and the bass working together or not, and you will feel that the woofer is either working in a consistent way or making some weird movements. So now you understand why I said, if you are using digital sources or samples, have your kicks tuned and have them in phase with your bass lines. But if you are using analog sound for either the kick or the bass, you're better to detune them and to have your kick at like a fifth from your bass line. I hope this was helpful and will help you achieve new heights with your own music. See you soon for more. Bye bye.